Welcome back, folks. Natalie Nidham, your host here. I'd like to open with a bit of a statement. You are not just a body with water in it. Consider that you are a body of water. And what's happening in that internal ocean matters so much more than most of us realize. So I have two guests with me today. First one, Charles Bohdy. He is the product developer and serial entrepreneur in advanced water purification technologies. He's developed a whole house biodynamic water filtration, no salt softening, and biofield imprinting structuring system, a unique alternative to conventional filters that restores water to its most vital and natural state. So really what we're talking about here, it's not just about cleaning the water. It's about, can we provide energized water that the body can use at a cellular level? This system is a next level biodynamic water system designed to remove modern toxins while also supporting biological coherence. We talk about what this means for human health and how this technology is also being used in agricultural settings where the results that it yields are undeniable. And we talk about exactly what that looks like in the episode. My second guest is Victor Sagalovsky, who you might know as someone who listened to this podcast. Victor has spent decades studying how water quality shapes cellular function and long-term health. We know him from Lightwater, the company bringing deuterium-depleted water to the world. He joined us today as the distributor of this new technology that he believes is the foundation of human health. And so if on a day-to-day basis, we're not getting this clean, energized water, even DDW might not be enough to restore us to full health. But that's a whole other conversation. In any event, if you want to learn more about this water system or you want to get your hands on one, go to lightwaterlabs.com/ELW and use code NAT100. This episode is brought to you by Regenerive, Oxford HealthSpan, and Oslo, all with special offers just for you, the listeners. Check out the show notes before for details. And enjoy the show. It is, I found everything I learned here particularly enlightening. Even if you never end up getting one of these whole home systems, I'm telling you guys, there's some valuable information here. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. Today, people, we have not one, but two guests. Our first guest is a repeat guest to the podcast, is Victor Sagalovsky from Lightwater Scientific. Victor, would you like to just say hello to the audience so they can hear your voice?
Hi, Natalie. Hello to the audience.
And on the other side of the mic, we have Charles Bohdy. Charles, welcome to the podcast. You're a first-time guest on the podcast, and you're really at the center of this new water technology that we're going to be talking about today.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure.
And both Victor and Charles are hailing from sunny places as opposed to me. I'm really grateful to have you both here. And really, we're talking about a topic I think that we just doesn't get addressed nearly enough, right? People worry about the air. I mean, look, we worry about our food. We worry about all of the toxins in the air appropriately because there's so much going on. But one of the most foundational aspects of properly fueling our bodies, and I'm going to refer to fueling and define that means very many different things, but a lot of that has to do with water. And water is so foundational to the human experience, to human health, to human functioning. And Charles, I guess, I'm a little unclear on this. Charles, this is your technology, yes? And you and Victor have collaborated in some way in terms of bringing it to market? Or Victor, did you play a role also in the water system we're talking about today?
My only role is to promote the technology. I really believe in the technology. It's a great solution for what everybody needs in their home. So outside of deuterium depleted water, but just for practical benefit. For water filtration, for everything you need to do. Yeah, this is fully Charles's technology, and I'm just a big supporter.
Amazing. Well, Charles, then that puts you center stage, sir. What are the issues that people are facing? Before we even talk about the technology, I'd love you to unpack a little bit about what are the issues that people knowingly or unknowingly have with the water that they're using in their homes, because this solution you're offering treats the whole home. and which brings up a lot of different topics. So I'd love to invite you to really kind of set the landscape about what are the issues with water that people are facing right now.
Well, when it comes to health, wholeness, and wellness, we need, like you mentioned, clean food, clean air, and clean water. And in North America, we're being bombarded with the opposite, in every category. And so, when it comes to water, there are all sorts of contaminants that we're having to deal with. We have everything from pathogens, in Canada and in the US, they only have certain limits or parameters that they have to get municipal water underneath. And that certainly doesn't mean pure, healthy, germ-free, chemical-free, contaminant-free water. It just means it's within a range.
Yeah.
And, then there are the sort of maybe more nefarious things that some of your listeners may be aware of with the geoengineering and the nanotechnology and the other, more sort of diabolical things that we're dealing with on a daily basis. So we've got biofilms, we've got pathogens, we've got, chlorine at levels that is 4 times the level that's safe to swim in municipal drinking water all across North America. In the United States, we have fluoride in our water that's being added in the majority of municipalities. I mean, with the recent EPA decision, there are certain municipalities that are slowly working on phasing the fluoride out. But then we've got, leftovers from World War II and postmodern industrial processing like, X and PFAS and some more of the forever chemicals. And that doesn't even, address, chloramines and trihalomethanes and disinfection byproducts. And then you have the deeper, darker hole of the informational component of water. So, in North America, our water goes down the toilet, down the sink, goes right back into a water treatment plant. They've got these scary looking toilet grabbing machines that grab, wet wipes and toilet paper out of the water. And it goes through a series of settling tanks where they douse it with massive amounts of chlorine, and then they let it settle out through a series of tanks. And then they pump it right back up into our towers again for us to drink all over again. And, Professor Bill Tiller of Stanford, he was the former dean of material sciences. He said that water is a cage-like molecule capable of storing frequencies and information. So it's akin to a liquid crystal with a memory bank. And even if you filter out and remove all of the toxic chemicals and bacteria and biofilms and nanotechnology that could be in the water, you still have the informational component or the memory of the water. And there are a wide variety of whole house water systems that are available for consumers to choose from. Everything from, salt systems for softening. You've got, RO systems to strip out everything. You've got, even distillation technology for little small batches. And then you've got, sort of just kind of big particle catching filters and carbon blocks or carbon, coconut husk or something like that to remove some of the stuff out of the water. But none of them are really addressing the memory. Mm-hmm. And, that's really the thing that I was setting out to accomplish is how do we remove all of the real bad contaminants, all of the pathogens, all of the bad elements, all of the disinfection byproducts and the forever chemicals, and still, drop the calcium out so it doesn't stick to our pipes and clog our, hot water tank heating elements and the other things, and then do it in a way where we're not trading for salt and slimy water, and then also get rid of the memory or the informational component of the water. And so I set out to design what I called a completely holistic approach to in-house water purification, softening, and structuring or programming, as it were, to reprogram the memory of the water with something that's healthy after we strip out the bad information that was left behind when we removed all the contaminants.
Hey folks, I just wanted to throw a little message in here for those of you who are sending me all these incredible questions on social media or through YouTube or even on Spotify, wherever you're listening to the podcast. I wish I could get back to you, each one of you personally, but unfortunately I can't. And because I cannot, I created, about a couple of years ago now, I created a membership community where I get to hang out with people just like you. I do live weekly Q&As, almost weekly anyway. We also do have podcast guests come in to answer everybody's questions and do presentations. You get to interact live with those podcast guests. We will sometimes do challenges with some of the partners. Like in 2026, we have a mitochondrial enhancement challenge coming up where we're going to be testing mitochondrial function. We're going to be testing people's deuterium levels. If you haven't heard about deuterium, we've got podcasts coming down the pipes on that. And then people will be invited to follow a personalized protocol and then retest their mitochondria on the other side. We offer that in the membership community, and we do it at incredible discounts that you just can't find anywhere else. So if you're interested in hanging out with me and other like-minded people, which actually happen to include some pretty awesome practitioners and even some previous podcast guests who've come and joined the community, then I invite you to check it out on my website, natnidham.com/the-longevity-community, or just go to natnidham.com and look for the longevity community tab at the top of the page. Click on that and see if this is right for you. I would love to see you there. And we could make 2026 our best year ever together. So once again, that's natnidham.com. Just look for the longevity community tab at the top of the page. Now let's get back to the show. I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about carbon, because a lot of people rely on carbon to filter out. And it is definitely something that, and it's interesting what you said about how municipalities, the good news is we're fortunate enough in North America that we can turn on a tap in most places, have a drink of that water. We're not going to have dysentery. We're not going to fall over and end up in the hospital. So we've got, which is, compared to many third world countries is probably a luxury. And what we're talking about here is really taking it up a notch. And I think understanding that water to our bodies is not just this H2O. It provides information, and it's an energetic component that the body then uses to make its own easy water and, other aspects of water, other phases of water, if it will. But before we even go down that road, I wanted to just start at the top here and talk about, carbon blocks and what the issues are with a carbon block, because a carbon block can definitely trap a lot of chemicals, but there's the issue of what happens to what's trapped in there, and can that itself become food for another problem? Do you want to speak to that a little bit? Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. There's more than one type of carbon. There are granular carbon filters. One of the latest trends is, organic coconut husk carbon, they like to call it. And all of the non-solid block carbon filters are prone to something called tunneling. And what happens is, as water begins to travel through the filter, water is very good at eroding its own pathways. It follows it seeks its own level. It follows the path of least resistance, and it goes to the low spot. So it's following gravity down a path, and those will, during the course of water traveling under pressure through a filter system, it creates this tunneling effect.
I see. So it creates paths, and then eventually there's whole sections that won't be touched. It'll just...
Correct.
It's like a stream, really. It's like a...
Exactly. And that's what makes, solid block carbon filters, the premier carbon filter.
Because it's forcing it through. Yeah.
Yeah, but one of the biggest things that nobody is willing to talk about when it comes to carbon is what an incredibly large surface area that it has, which is what makes it effective. But it's an incredibly large breeding ground for pathogens, viruses, and bacteria. And so, that's the real issue is it becomes, if you're not dealing with the pathogens pre-carbon, or if you're not using a treated form of carbon filter that's impregnated with something like silver to prevent pathogen growth, then you end up developing, in many cases, a gigantic bionesting area with a massive amount of surface area in the carbon filter itself. And this has been tested over and over at laboratories. This isn't Charles's opinion. These are things that have been proven time and time again.
Yeah.
In the old days, 35 years ago, it was way more common to impregnate the carbon with silver or something to keep the growth down. But
that makes sense. Yeah.
It's cheaper to do it without. So the majority of the filters don't have this today.
And it's interesting that, I'm looking at our notes here and we're talking about it, even when we pair it with UV or ozone, it's the dead organisms and biofilms that can actually, it's the physical material of the dead organisms and the biofilms, so little dead bodies, if you will, that basically can stay there and provide a medium for additional growth. And that, I guess, would be where it's only silver that can kind of mitigate that, or would you still have those issues with the silver?
No, it's not only silver. Silver is just one of the more effective ones that work.
Okay.
It's really hard for a virus or a bacteria to get a resistance to. There are certain types of poisons and things that they'll develop a resistance to over time. Silver kills with oxygen, and it's really hard for them to develop a resistance to silver.
Interesting. Yeah.
But you're right. What you said, I like to call them the dead carcasses. Is it something people can relate to? It's the carcass of the bacteria. It becomes the building block, as you said, of biofilm. And, so that's one of the huge issues. If you're even with UV, you're letting all of that dead biofilm material go right on into the system where it can continue to build up in layers and layers. And that's how biofilms develop and become so hard for people to deal with. Mm-hmm. And, it's one of the least, really, it's for average people that aren't in the science or biology fields, aren't in the medical fields, they really don't think much about the fact that, we've killed all the bacteria, so it's safe now, but they don't realize, the fact that it becomes a food. Years ago when I was working with biocides, one of the things is that you'd see on a biocide bottle, it would say it was biodegradable. And all that really meant is that when the killing power was gone, it became food for the microorganism. And that's again due to this effect that you're describing. So biodegradable isn't always the greatest thing when it comes to like a biocide for killing a germ, for example.
Yeah, that's wild. In your system, you worked with a Princeton affiliated tech prof to develop a very different base layer. You've gone beyond the carbon. You've developed a nano-ceramic 9-layer biodynamic filtration system. That's a bit mind-bending, right? So do you want to help us understand kind of how this is different? You're going beyond conventional porosity here. You're using multiple layers, you're using electrical charges. And you're targeting different classes of contaminants. And what I will say is, now having had this system in my house for a while, the one thing that I worry about when I'm bringing a whole home system into my house is I see that there's many different stages of stuff going on downstairs. And I'm like, oh my God, how is the water going to make it up 3 floors to my shower and come out the shower head so that I don't have to run around my bathtub trying to get wet? These are the crazy questions I ask myself, right? And the cool thing is that hopefully you're going to walk us through this technology that you've developed takes that right out of play. There's been no impact to the water pressure in my house. I'm very happy to report. Maybe you can take us through a little bit about this technology that really goes out. It solves a lot of the problems that we described a few minutes ago.
Yeah, well, I don't take the claim for the filters themselves. They were designed with a good friend of mine and a Princeton professor. And what they were looking at was in-house surgical theaters. So this was developed over the course of 25 years. So they were looking at irrigation water that's being used in oral and plastic surgery in-house, which is very strictly tested. And so that's where the idea of the non-porosity-based filtration came from, and the nano-ceramic and the electrical charge factor to use to selectively remove contaminants. So the first phase is a pretty novel, very high-flow pre-filter. And our pre-filter slowly over the course of a year releases tiny amounts of atomic iodine. And what that does is that keeps killing germs in both the pre-filter and in even the carbon block. But it doesn't, again, rely on porosity. This is the novelty of it. It's not reducing your water flow by using like a big sieve or a net to catch and filter out big particles, which is how almost all filters are rated in the traditional filter world. And the second phase is the multilayer biodynamic filter. One of those layers is a silver impregnated carbon, but we don't rely on that if you have a municipal water supply, because there's just too much chlorine. Like I mentioned, it just so happened when I was 18 years old, I got a job working for a company that sold NSA water filters. And we used to do orthotality and pool test kits in people's kitchens. And we would take a glass of water out of the sink, put the drops from the pool test kit in it, and it would come out looking like the brightest urine after a B vitamin you'd ever seen. It would, on the chart, it would be 3 to 4 times the level of what was safe to swim.
In a chlorine.
Chlorine, and they put masking agents in it so you can't smell it. And so you're getting that with every sip or every flush or.
And can I just say that chlorine has a lot of different issues for human health, but one of them is that it displaces iodine on your thyroid hormones. And so we have an epidemic. We have an epidemic of people whose thyroids don't work properly. And there's very often subclinical, and there's many different reasons for that. But certainly having chlorine, which has a stronger bond or stronger attraction, then can displace iodine at the spot. So now instead of a tea with like the tyrosine with 4 iodines or 3 iodines or whatever it is, you could end up with, if you're lucky, 1 or 2 iodines. But once it no longer has the iodines it needs and they've been replaced by chlorine, it's useless to your body. Your body can't function properly.
That's right.
So sorry, I just wanted to jump in there just to bring home to people quite apart from the fact that chlorine is wildly irritating and no good for you to begin with, it's also a material issue for thyroid function. So I dropped in there, but go ahead.
And your gut, and your gut too. Yeah. I mean, everything really, but yeah.
110%. And it's really often overlooked in discussions of chlorine when you're reading about the harm that chlorine causes. They focus on the chloramines, the trihalomethanes, the disinfection byproducts that are formed, when an organic matter comes in contact with chlorine, and those are all really bad for you. But it was really driven home for me 11 years ago. I moved to Florida from the great state of Ohio. And we didn't have a really long enough season to have an in-ground swimming pool in Ohio, but my first home in Florida, I inherited one. And I had a 6-month-old baby, and they were all girls, and a 4 and a 5-year-old. And my 4 and 5-year-olds turned into fish within 6 weeks of moving into this new house with the attached, pool and everything. And I watched their beautiful, golden and then brown hair that was shiny and lustrous turn into straw over 6 weeks. And then I saw their skin start to get chalky. So that's when I really began to dig in and do the research. I mean, I knew intellectually chlorine was bad for you, but I hadn't really done a ton of reading and research on it. And that's when I found out just literally how toxic it was. And that's how I ended up developing my first chemical-free swimming pool system because of it. So this chlorine journey for me goes all the way back to my swimming pool, my first swimming pool, and coming up with a way to swim in clean chlorine-free water. The drinking water system came down the road with the development of my nanotechnology for health and healing, the NP bot therapy that we developed. Because when we're filling a tub in a treatment clinic for someone to get healed of a complex illness, the water has to be pristine because we're doing electrolysis in our in our processing. And electrolyzing chlorine and iron and some of these heavier elements is not a good thing.
Right.
So the system was born of that. And then I just, I've already developed systems for air and other things. And I realized, water is something I really hadn't addressed for homeowners. And I knew lots about water. I've built and tested over 25 years, many different types of structuring devices that primarily they're only used in industry for agriculture. Because if you can increase the yield of a row crop or fruit and vegetable by 20 to 50% or even more in some cases, it has a real world value. So the agricultural industry is one of the first industries to embrace what modern science would call woo-woo up until Gerald Pollack came out and published his findings on easy water, which you referenced. So, all the way back in the 70s, Gilbert Ling did all of his seminal research on intracellular fluids and how the water inside our cells is quite different than, the water that we drink and the water that we imbibe and swim in and all of these other applications. But it was really Gerald Pollack's research in discovering this different structure to water as it passed through the Nafian membranes, and then having other PhD scientists around the world begin to replicate these results and realize, hey, there's something to this.
Yeah.
That structuring got taken seriously in the world of, hard science in universities. Because prior to that, again, it was just agriculture. They saw they'd stick these structuring units on these large 8-inch agricultural lines and they get 25% more yield in their crops. That's a real thing. And, plants aren't subject to, the placebo effect.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Okay. But I took you off topic there. You were talking about the physical filtration system.
Sure.
So we got to the carbon layer that is silver impregnated so that the microbial growth in the filter media is inhibited. And then you've got layers after that.
Yeah, well, so the nano-ceramic layer, its first thing is to physically remove viruses and bacteria. So we physically remove, as you mentioned, the body of the virus or the body of the bacteria. We've got studies showing 99.999999% or 7 nines of the viruses and 99.109% on the bacteria, which is very close to bacteriostatic. Because each 9, it's a logarithmic scale, is 10 times more than the 9 before that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so it is a really, really dynamic filter when it comes in terms of physically removing the dead virus and the bacteria.
And where do they go?
Where do they go? Stay trapped. They go in the trash a year from now when you pull out the filter layer.
Oh,
okay. They stay trapped in the membrane. And then each of the successive layers works on removing the forever chemicals, the fluoride. We even remove harmful minerals and elements like, cadmium and uranium and, manganese and some of these more toxic minerals while still leaving the magnesium and trace copper and cobalt and calcium, which our bodies require.
Yeah.
And so it's a very novel way of doing it because, as again, you said there's almost no pressure drop across the first and second membrane. The pressure drop that does come, the slight one, it's from the carbon block. Now, we don't include those if you're on a well. If you're on a well, we typically would use 2 of the biodynamic filters in succession because you won't have the high chlorine levels that you do in a municipality. But It's critical that biodynamic filter, again, goes before the carbon filter. So you physically remove the dead bacteria and viruses before it's going through that solid block of carbon to pull out the rest of the hardcore municipal chlorine levels that we get, in the cities.
Yeah. Well, and the fluoride. You mentioned fluoride earlier, but for those of us where fluoride is added, like put fluoride in my toothpaste, not in my water. I don't know.
Even the kind of fluoride that they did all the great studies on for teeth isn't the kind of fluoride they're adding to municipal water supply.
Right.
So, that all came about in the 50s with the creation of the EPA, where all of a sudden manufacturers were forced to deal with runoff from some of their more toxic, byproducts of and the process of removing bauxite from aluminum and certain types of electrolysis. One of the byproducts is fluoride. And so they hired, they hired Bernays to figure out how do you get people to believe that we should put fluoride in our water. And they found these couple of studies on sodium fluoride in Texas where they showed this reduction in caries or cavities. And Bernays' one of his go-to things was to create an institute with a fancy sounding name to promote the thing that you wanted to change. And so the American Dental Association didn't start out as 4 out of 5 dentists recommend. It was a pimply-faced dentist that just graduated dental school in Brooklyn that was hired by Bernays to figure out, now, if you don't know who he is, he's the father of propaganda, to promote the fluoridation of drinking water. And it was really a scheme by these chemical companies to avoid hefty EPA fines and prevent them from having to deal with the toxic waste. Because, even if you accept that the fluoride that they put in the drinking water is good for cavities, even though it's not the right type of fluoride, if we accept that as a given that, okay, that's what it's for, it's still 97 to 98% of the water that comes through your water main isn't drunk by anybody in the house. It goes in your toilets. It goes in your kitchen sink. It goes down your bathtub drain. It goes down your shower drain. And every time it goes down that drain, what do you have? Free toxic waste removal that the chemical companies don't have to pay for.
Oh boy.
And so that's the real reason that it was sold wholesale to the public was for cavities. It was really just a mechanism to get rid of the stuff. Back in the day. Yeah. Yeah, it's horribly poisonous. Okay. And now they've got dentists so brainwashed. I watched my friends who are the ones that just won this EPA trial. It went on for almost 10 years. And always they would have these dentists come to staunchly defend this fluoride. And they were all so poorly educated when it really came to the difference between the types of fluoride and even the history of it.
Right. It's sodium fluoride that they add to the water, right, Charles? It's sodium fluoride.
No, I'd have to read that again, Victor. It's been a while since I looked at it. I think it's a longer type of fluoride, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Well, regardless, I mean, I think fluoride also can displace iodine. Sadly, iodine is the weakest link. So it can be displaced by fluoride, bromide, which a lot of people use in their pools instead of chlorine, which is better than chlorine, but still stronger than iodine. So it's just, right. It's degrees. So at the end of the day, we don't want those guys. You've got all these layers here. What I find really interesting is you're able to leave behind the beneficial minerals that you just mentioned, the calcium, the magnesium, the copper. Is that because of a certain charge? Like how is the system able?
All related to charge, 100%. Okay. And so that's the beautiful thing about this system is, unlike, reverse osmosis has become, the wealthy homeowner's go-to system for fixing your water. But the problem is our RO systems are really bad for water. I mean, we've done a lot of studies with reverse osmosis water. They started putting them into commercial greenhouses 25 years ago, and they quickly began ripping them out because they found the plants were subject to a lot higher mold growth than you would get out of other types of filtration. And it strips the minerals. So if you believe in Victor Schauberger's theories of water, he would call that immature water. It's hungry for information, like distilled water, because you've removed the minerals from it. And so it has a tendency to leach minerals out of the things that it goes through. And that's why the more expensive RO systems, have a section to try to remineralize the water. But it doesn't change the memory, and it certainly leaves water that is what I would call sick water. It's not healthy. It's not imprinted with the biofield again. It doesn't have the components that are life-giving. And that's why they ended up ripping these systems out of these big greenhouses as they were attempting to put them in, because it didn't do the things they were hoping it would do.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I mean, confession, I had an RO system, and we had added an extra component to remineralize the water, but definitely, we're going to talk, I want to talk about the structuring and the energy of water and the memory of water. I want to refer to, I don't remember his name, but the Japanese scientist very famously, who did his experiments. But before, I want to get through like the physical other pieces, and then I want to get to that as well. So there's a softening piece to the water here. We don't end up with hard water. So how does the no salt softening work, and where does that fit into the system? And why is it even important?
There are two pieces to the no salt softening system. Yeah. And it is not as effective as a salt softener in terms of getting to 100%, but we can drop it between 80 and 90%. We can take of that calcium to aragonite. And aragonite is the crystallized form of calcium, so it's still there. It's still calcium, but in that geometry, it doesn't stick to your pipes. It won't stick to your hot water elements in your hot water heater. And it just continues passing, through the system, going down the drains and back into the whole recycling process we were talking about at the beginning of the video.
Which sounds somewhat horrifying, I'm here to say. Yes.
It first goes through a very high magnetic field of over 10,000 Gauss. And so that's helping to start change that. And then it begins vortexing. And the vortexing is two-part. It's literally part of the softening system. The reason I selected this mechanism is because it has a dual function. And the dual function is to begin the memory erasure of the water. So it's being vortexed as catalyst discs. And the catalysts are what help create an ion that changes that calcium to aragonite. And there's two components in the system that you've probably seen them in your own home, the two stainless steel tubes that are in there. And that's what the first one is, a much higher magnetic field. The second one is a lot more of the vortexing catalyst disc. And that passive ionization is what creates the power as water flows through it to drop that calcium to aragonite. But it works very well. And, I had pretty heavy calcium content in my water. I have some phenomenal, delicious, water where I live. I'm 10 minutes from where they shot all the Johnny Weissmuller movies back in the 30s. It's called the Silver Springs here in Florida. And it's a big artesian well, but it's filtered through thousands of feet of limestone. And so it picks up a lot of calcium and lime in the water. And we used to get, calcium rings around the toilet. And with this system on it, we don't get that anymore. But, it's a pre-memory eraser. So the vortexing disc, that's one of the things Victor Schauberger proved, is that when water is spun around in a vortex and it tumbles, it's able to change that memory and begin to make it new so that it can be, reprogrammed. And that's where the last step of the device comes in, which is a true Schaubergerian water vortexing, tumbling, and structuring device. And so we're actually imprinting the water with the energy of the biofield, which is the energy of life. There are over 150 types of very special minerals and organics that are suspended, and it creates passive ionization as water again flows through it. And that is due to the effect of the mineral balls that are in there. It creates this ionization, and that provides the, again, electricity or the energy to transmit the biofield into the water as it's passively passing through. These are not connected to household power. These are powered by the flow of water going through the system. And we've got studies from university in Czechoslovakia and in India showing anywhere from 20 to 250% yield increases on row crops, fruits, and vegetables. Wow. And as we mentioned, plants they're not subject to the placebo effect. So if you're getting, a huge yield increase on your mangoes and on your rice and your corn and your soybeans and on all of the different crops that we've tested it on, then it's actually doing something in the real world that's measurable. And that's who the majority of our clients are. They're agricultural customers.
Really? So I would think that even livestock, if you're giving this water to livestock, you're getting better results as well. They would.
We have studies on chickens, on turkeys, on dairy cattle. I have a system that's more complicated than that, where it's called MakeCowsGiveMoreMilk.com, where we're actually bringing nanotized hydrogen and oxygen to the dairy cattle. But the very last step that we do is we run it through a much larger structuring unit, about 3.5 feet long, this big in diameter, 4-inch diameter, and it is imprinting the biofield back into the water that the cattle drink. And the result is the cows produce 20% more milk.
Wow.
And they're much healthier. Their hooves are shiny and their hair is, shinier, and they have less retained placentas, and their vet bills drop by half. There's all sorts of ancillary benefits, but the farmers are paying us because we increase in milk.
100%. Well, and I think what I'd like to point out is this is mimicking nature. And this is what makes this so interesting, right? In nature, your water would tumble through streams and waterfalls. It would get filtered through soil.
Absolutely.
It would run across rocks. That imparts this energy into the water molecules. And this brings us to the whole conversation around structured water or water that is, it's almost like you're bringing the energy back into the water so that it brings energy to the system, and the body can now use it to produce energy.
That's exactly right. And if you study the works of Victor Schauberger, who was an Austrian naturalist, he spent 20 years in the Black Forest studying nature. And he's really the father of what we call today the science of biomimicry. His motto was study nature, understand it, and then copy it. And so he proved that water has a life cycle. So immature water would be either rainwater or distilled water, or even, as I mentioned a little earlier, RO water, because it's been stripped of all of its memory, it's been stripped of its minerals, and it's been stripped of its information. So it's hungry. And then as it begins to percolate through the soil and travel through underground capillaries that feed the streams and end up feeding the rivers and in the lakes, and then percolates down into the soil, goes through into the artesian wells, eventually it develops enough memory where it picks up all of these things. And then Schauberger proved that it contains a levitating quality, and that's what we call springs. So when you get, if you've ever been to a source spring, there's no amount of pumping that needs to be done. It just comes out of the ground.
It's bubbling.
I've been to an ideal spring in the mountains in Italy at the top of Lissa, where we were bottling water using some of my other technology. And the water comes out, it just comes out of the ground continuously, hundreds of thousands of gallons a day. And it's just perfect water that's been through the whole cycle and then comes out again. One of Schauberger's patents was a way to take immature water and turn it into this ideal water with a very special type of well system. But essentially that's what we're mimicking with the structuring device without having to go out into our backyards and dig a big well and jacket it with all of the different materials that Schauberger proved would work to artificially accelerate that.
Well, I can tell you that I can dig as much as I want in my backyard. I'm not hitting a well. I'm in a city.
Yeah.
I'd have to dig myself to another country to pretty much get anywhere. And even then, I think I'd hit molten rock before I hit water.
You'd hit a municipal water pipe.
Exactly. I would hit a municipal water pipe and all my neighbors would be mad at me. And then the only energy would be bad energy. So
There you go.
I don't think I have too many options. So
I think now, if we have customers that are on wells, we do ask that they send us a water report, and then we'll customize a filter system specifically to their water, because there can be challenges in different types of wells in different parts of the area. They may have very high radon content or radium content or uranium or super high levels of calcium. It is possible to have such high levels of calcium that we would have to add a secondary, a resin-based non-salt calcium remover. If you're mostly it would be places like Southwest Arizona, some parts of Western Texas, but we may just need to upsize the filter housings from 2.5 to 4 inch. On municipal, it's a standard system, but with a well, you just send us a water report, and we'll make sure that you get exactly what you need. The filter change cycle that you need. For a municipal system, it's one change a year.
Yeah. Well, we have a lake house, and the lake that we're on, actually the water, it is the name of the lake is Kashi, which means healing waters. It's extremely high, but it's extremely high in iron, which may be healing in some ways, but you don't want to be drinking that stuff.
That's right.
And the water is literally red. Right.
Yeah.
And then we also are in a shallow bay that we share with a couple of beaver families, which bring another set of challenges to the table. So, I think other than well water, even people who are on lakes, and we're pulling our water straight from the lake, would need a different type of system than what I have, for example, in my house. Because in many ways you would say, well, that water's moving. It came up through us. It's spring fed and the whole 9 yards, but it's going to have its own particularities even there to
the amount of total dissolved solids really is important for your source water. With municipal water sources, they usually keep it at around 100 to 150, and then, but anything else, you could have 1,500, 2,000 ppm of TDS.
So there's a physical filter that needs to happen. Yeah.
Where I have property in Alabama, I tested the water, and it was like 20 ppm TDS. And I go, wow, it's incredibly low. And then the stream I'm on, it's called in the original language, Ketchipadraki, it means crystal clear water.
Wow. So
I was like, I got into the right spot. But it's because there's a lot of mica in there. So the mica filters a lot of filters a lot of the water. So it's what we were looking for, something where we can get a spring water that has low TDS. But not everybody's, not everybody's.
Well, it's a high need commodity, right? So I'd like to go back a little bit to RO water, because a lot of people are using it, and there's definitely. Look, at the end of the day, RO does a certain amount of good work. It's not all bad, but I'd love to talk a little bit. You've already talked about the byproducts of chlorine, like chloramines, that it can't remove. Apparently there's certain dissolved gases like CO2, methane, radon that maybe don't get removed and need to be, and things like, and then there's a shift in pH that can happen, and then there's an issue with maybe fungus. Do you want to talk about that?
With RO water, fungus loves RO water for some reason. That was one of the reasons they started removing them from these commercial greenhouses when they started putting them in.
Oh, you said that's right. You said so much mold.
It was mold on the plants that they were experiencing, not mold in the RO filters or in their houses. It was somehow weakening the natural defenses of the plant after being used in RO. Now, the original RO membranes were made by actually irradiating the membrane, and they were using the atomic pores that were being created through radiation. That's not how they do it now. They have far more sophisticated membrane technology. But that was one of the first, research lab grade, ways that they were doing it. And Victor knows lots about RO because his good friend was one of the co-inventors of RO. It's a mutual friend of ours. And so we're not RO haters. It's just that in a municipal drinking water system, we don't think it's the ideal mechanism today with advances in technology that have come over the last 25 years.
Yeah. No,
do you have anything you'd like to add to that, Victor?
Specifically the advancement in technology, right? That's what we're always getting at. Our RO was great 30, 40 years ago. We've learned a lot since then. With our standard for drinking water, it's a new standard, deuterium depleted, and now we have a new standard for filtration too. So I'm very keen on these types of forward-thinking companies. They're providing like solutions for looking at things in a new way, and using technology that didn't exist 40 years ago to create a better path for filtration. So it's really exciting.
Well, I think what's also really exciting is the agricultural validation that you've got. I think that, we can always test our water, and I want to get back to the memory of water and the energy. I want to talk about that. But before we go there, the experiments, the experiments and the validation that you've acquired through the agricultural model, I think speaks volumes, because as you said a couple of times, there's no placebo effect when it comes to plants and animals. Like either they grow more or they don't grow more. And not to mention the fact that we're talking about the agricultural industry, you're talking about an industry that they will only spend money on something if it increases their yield, period.
Oh, you are 100% right.
Like they don't care if it's, they care if it's good, sort of, but not really, as we can see from fertilizers and whatnot. But for any industrial setting in the agriculture to spend money on a system, it's going to be for one reason and one reason only.
Oh, yeah, you were correct. And that's one of the things there are things like, depending on the crop, if it's strawberries, with structured water, you see an increase in the Brix rating that goes dramatically up. And that's directly related to how much they get for the strawberries. That's the sugar content of the strawberry. It increases. And that's seen with structured water in many different fruits that you grow with structured water. But, when it comes to RO, there's another detriment to RO. Not that it doesn't work well, but it doesn't filter all of the water. So a percentage of the water that goes through the RO filter takes the contaminants that were removed from the treated side. This is why when you have reverse osmosis on, at an ocean, desalination plant, you have the treated water and then you have brine, and the brine has double the salt concentration as the untreated water because that's where the salt went. And it's the same thing with the contaminant side on an RO system. You're treating twice as much water as you get filtered because the contaminants go on the waste side, and they're going down the drain. So you're not filtering 100% of the water that flows through the RO. Part of it is the water that has the contaminants that have been removed. And again, it's not picking on RO. There's tons of, places that depend on it every single day for their people to have salt-free water. There, places like the Maldives and certain islands where they absolutely depend on reverse osmosis to have water to live. But again, then they have these other problems from the brine water that a lot of times they'll flush that right into the ocean. It can have a detrimental effect on sea life and things because the salt's too high on the discharge side. And it's similar, in some of the applications where depending on the contaminants, the RO membranes removed. And, the membranes themselves are kind of expensive to replace when you're getting into high volume, water. On a municipal system, people don't have to worry about that too much. But,
well, it adds up, but it's the cost of doing business at some degree, and I think that it's kind of, it's better than nothing, and until you have a better option, it's you do the best that you can. So I do want to get back to the issue of structuring and your the conversation around the memory of water, and I want to kick it off with that experiment that was done in Japan where people literally spoke to water. And then the water was put under a microscope. Yeah. I can't imagine you're not more familiar with this than I am, because I know when I saw that article, it fascinated me. And maybe one of you would like to speak to it a little bit, because I do think that we underestimate water as an energetic entity.
Are you familiar with the cooked rice experiments that they did all over Japan and then have been replicated at schools here in North America?
No. I just know the one where they said bad words to it and good words to it. Tell me about the cooked rice experiment.
Tell us.
Well, that's what they did. So they took so you make cooked rice and you put it in 3 jars. And one jar gets ignored. Another jar gets told, I hate you, or other bad things. And the third jar, you're told, I love you, thank you, gratitude.
Best. Yeah.
And they do this every day for 20 days or something like that. You can see photographs online. There's tons of kids' experiments. The one that's ignored gets the worst. It turns black with bacteria usually. The I hate you one typically gets green and fungally. And the one that you say I love you and thank you, it tends to turn into a golden malted rice. And this is all from, yeah.
Okay.
And this is all from the function of the memory in the water that's in the rice. And so Emoto did things like exposing water to microwaves, exposing them to TV signals, exposing them to radio waves. He did, different words where he would write on a label, a word, I hate you, I love you, gratitude, praying. They had a lot of experiments that he did with Buddhist monks and Christian priests and praying over the water. And then he would photograph the water as it formed a crystal.
Yeah.
And the ones with the, harmful words, like you would say, they would form an amorphous blob and not a beautiful crystalline structure. There are people that criticized his methodology. So a German guy, and his book behind me on the shelf, named Bernd Kropf, decided to make it rigidly scientific with controls and proper regimen. He's a PhD physicist. And he used dried water droplets. They did the exact same things and found absolutely it could be replicable with the same information, the same words, the crystals that would form on the dried water droplets. And he ended up writing a book called World in a Drop. And so it's amazing that water is this cage-like molecule capable of storing frequencies and information. And Tiller, who I mentioned, Professor Bill Tiller of Stanford, he was the world's foremost authority on crystals, matrices, and interfaces. And he was the dean of material science at Stanford. And, he's the one where I first learned the information that water was a cage-like molecule and that it was basically a liquid memory crystal.
Yeah. And so what does this mean to human health? Like, what does it mean to someone's body to drink water that is either organized in a beautiful crystal versus water that is a blob, that is disorganized, let's say? It no longer is organized in that crystalline structure.
Well, Victor would have a very nice way of describing that, because I told Victor we're 80% water, and he quickly corrected me. So you remember that conversation, Victor?
I do. 98.9% by molecular weight. So just about every molecule in our body is attached to H2O, which is quite profound. I was
just asking, what does it mean to our body, right, to have water that has been organized in a crystal versus water that's kind of blobby?
It's just the organization of information, right? How information flows. You look at a crystal, it's more ordered, right? It's and when something is more structured, more information,
exactly right.
More information can be stored, and that information can be accessed easily, and there's no loss in the information, so it's not muddy. But I just wanted to.
It's kind of like the difference between pencil lead and graphene. They're both carbon, but the structure of the graphene makes one a room temperature superconductor. The other one will still conduct electricity. If you didn't know that, your pencil lead will conduct electricity, but it's not going to do it like graphene.
Right.
Not efficiently.
Right. It's just a more structured form of the original material, carbon. In 1988 there was a Time magazine article about Jacques Benveniste and his ability and everything we were talking about and the memory of water and storing information in it, and then accessing that information, even the original source of that information is no longer in water. That was 1988. Okay. That was in Time magazine. And then after that, it was kind of all this stuff was kind of poo-pooed, because our Western medical, our science has evolved to the point where we're at a real impasse, where we've come to the point where we realize that the thoughts and the energy and the intention of the experimenter affects the experiment. That's not really good for material science.
Exactly right.
Not very good for material science, right? That's like the one that changes, that forces you to reevaluate your foundation. So right now we're reevaluating the real foundation. We're water beings. And so what does that mean? And so as we understand more and more of this, we understand what our needs are. And when we understand what our, the necessity of invention, the necessities of mother invention. So here, Charles has come up with something that he was looking for a solution, found people that were developing in an area that was really critical, right? Which is dental irrigation, medical procedures, because they needed a whole new standard, right?
Right.
And the same thing was done for air security a long time ago. There was air filtration, but then clean rooms came in and said, hey, we need another standard because this is not good enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
So this is what Charles did here. He took something that was developed for a specific higher standard and say, look, can I figure out a way for everybody to have this? And that's what exists here.
It's kind of like HEPA filtration, and the average person thinks that HEPA filtered air is the best air you can get. And Victor and I both know that, viruses and bacteria and some mold spores can go sailing right through a HEPA filter. Certainly the, MVOCs and the mycotoxins can go through them. And so that's why they had to develop this new standard in laboratories that Victor's describing, because, you get one thing in a clean room that can get onto your silicon wafer when you're trying to manufacture a semiconductor. And so they had to rely on charge. Same thing we're using in the water filter. They use ionization and charge.
Electrophoresis.
They have math step in. Yeah, absolutely. And it's, in my home, I put in electrostatic precipitators in my in-home air handler.
So do I.
Because that's one of the only ways to deal with the stuff that will go sailing through the filters. And, HEPA filters aren't practical on a home system because you have to increase the amount of CFM going through your blower to such high levels because of the restriction of porosity filtration in the air. And that's what we did away with in our water. We got rid of the porosity filtration. Mm-hmm. That's how you're getting water on the third level of your home, but it's still treated and safe and soft because it's a paradigm shift.
Yeah. Well, and that it truly is. Like, there will be in the show notes, there'll either be a photograph or a link to a photograph of the system. Because people need to see this. Like, first of all, it's beautiful, right? You get these the last two units that are the vortexing unit and those two metal units are actually gorgeous cylinders, but it is remarkable the volume of water that the system handles.
Well, and at some point we really need to talk about showering, because that's the dirty little secret in everybody's house. How dangerous it is for your lungs to shower. It's the equivalent of smoking packs of cigarettes every time you take a shower if you're on a municipal water supply because of that chlorine. Mm-hmm. And how much better the skin is at absorbing things than even the gut lining. You get more chlorine when you shower through your skin than you get out of drinking chlorinated tap water. And those studies have been done. And so it's really, really important that you get rid of the chlorine from your showers. And those little tiny shower head units don't quite cut it.
They don't cut it. They don't cut it.
Well, they don't cut it for long.
There's been a lot of study on that,
Yeah. Well, it's interesting now that you mention it, my skin is a lot less dry. And I'm saying that in the middle of winter.
Yes. All right.
I hadn't noticed that, but my skin is a lot less dry since my system got installed. Like, very often if I take a shower before bed or something, I find like I have to put a lot of moisturizer on, and I don't think I'm not actually having that reaction. So that's pretty cool. I hadn't even noticed that. The water's less drying.
A spring water shower at home, right?
And you're up north. You're up north, correct? You're where it's 20% humidity with your furnace on, right?
Yeah. No, I'm in Toronto, so it's it's winter. This is
Victor's got hills in the place with the highest rainfall on Earth right now, and where I live, there's quite a bit too. But Toronto in the winter, that's 20% humidity, so it would be drying.
It's not an ideal climate. I'll leave it at that. There was a note in the note about contaminants, the overlooked water contaminants that can contribute to hypoxia and inflammation. And it was something about nitrates and why they matter. Does either of you want to tackle that one? Because that's a new concept to me, and I wasn't sure exactly where I should mention it, but it sounds like it's something we all should be aware of.
Oh, if Victor wants to speak to that, nitrates are bad all the way around. So there's quite a few. That's a disinfection byproduct of chlorine.
If you have nitrates in your water, it's not filtered well enough, not even close.
It's not, okay. And so the RO basically is that another issue with reverse osmosis, or is that just a general issue with
I'd say that's the traditional filters that are being sold on Home Depot, Lowe's, and the big box stores.
Like that little thing you put on the end of your tap. I've never really understood those things, how they're supposed to really do much. I mean, again, probably better than nothing.
Most of them are just a little bit of charcoal or carbon, that's mostly what they are.
They don't do much, and in fact,
and then you get the jugs.
And those jugs, after a few uses, you smell that filter, and you'll smell the bacteria. So that's not that's a temporary solution. And then
again, it's the massive surface area of the carbon.
It's what we were talking about earlier. And I think also, I mean, the one of the big issues, even people who have water dispensers in their fridge, like we got a new fridge when we got this house, and I refused to get a water dispenser in my fridge because the biggest problem is you forget to change the filter in those things. So the only thing worse that water that's not filtered is water that's coming through old filters that haven't been changed in time. It's
100%. And since I started putting these systems on my house, we drink out of our refrigerator water all the time. Well, we love our ice because it's all getting pre-filtered before it goes through the little carbon blocks in the refrigerator. Yeah. So, that's the beauty of it. It's every tap, every, toilet, every shower head, it's all treated. So you don't have to worry about any of that stuff.
It's really freeing. It used to be that if I was on the third floor getting ready for bed and I forgot to bring up my water, I'd go 3 floors down to go to the kitchen to get to my little sink. And I now have to remind myself, you don't have to do that. You can just use the water out of the tap. It is a bit of a luxury, you guys. I'm not going to lie. It feels very luxurious not to have to worry about any of the water in your house anymore.
It's the hardest thing I had to deal with my wife is we had a little undersink unit always in every house I've ever had. And she only wants to take the water out of that. And I keep telling her, you can take it out of every tap. It's all treated.
Yeah, it's a mind shift.
It is. Yes.
It's a total mind shift. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, as we close up, if somebody's interested in a system like this, and this is a whole home system. And I will tell you guys, like getting it installed, you do for me, I needed a plumber. I'm not handy that way. I know, Charles, you were saying that some people do it themselves. But what's needed to set up a system once we purchase it? And what does annual maintenance actually involve? Like, what do people need to know about this?
Well, annual maintenance is really simple. You just order the filters and replace the 3 filters, and that takes about 5 minutes, and a kindergartner could do it. You just take that little wrench and twist the blue canister off, drop the filter out of the inside, put the new one in, and tighten it. That's
probably
simple.
You need to shut off the water to the system, though, and the little shutoffs are right there. So
that's how we recommend is that you install a bypass. That way, even when you're changing your filters, you have water coming out of your house. It won't be filtered water during the time that you're doing your filter change, but it allows all the toilets and the showers to still work during that filter changeover process. I would say the majority of our customers have ended up hiring plumbers.
Hold on.
Just because the average homeowner doesn't have basic plumbing skills. But if you have basic plumbing skills, it takes maybe 1 to 2 hours to do the switchover and the install. And as far as where to get it, Victor's the best guy to get it from. I don't sell the filters directly. We rely exclusively on distributors to take care of that for us.
Okay. And then I just wanted to do like a quick cost comparison of this system versus something like an RO. If you had a whole house RO system, you would probably often need to also add a whole home softener. And then if you wanted to add structuring to that, it would be even more money. Like looking at the math here, you're looking to somewhere between $12,000 to $15,000 if you were going to get those three elements on a whole home system. Is that about right? If we were going to do
good structuring devices are typically between $3,000 to $5,000 just for the structuring unit.
Yeah.
RO systems can be, $5,000 to $10,000 for a residence. A larger residence, of course, would be more. But this little system does up to a 5,000 square foot home with 5 baths, an average of 150,000 gallons a year. And we can double that just by changing the canisters to 4.5 inch over 2.5 inch. So we can handle most residences without a big footprint. And that's the beauty of the system. We're replacing 3 giant tanks with traditional filtration with a very small footprint.
And with a comparatively much smaller price tag, I might add. So the system comes in around $6,300, and it gives you all those elements, guys. It's going to clean everything out. Your water is it's essentially softening the water, and it's structuring the water, all built into a $6,300 system, which also doesn't take a massive amount of space, which was the thing that when I first agreed to have one in, I don't have a lot of room in my utility room. And I remember thinking to myself, what did I just agree to? Like, what if I don't have space for this thing? And then when it came in, I was like, that's it. And so I'll take a picture of it for everybody. I would say that unless you're really good with plumbing, getting a plumber to come in is probably the best solution, but that's my personal advice. And it was not that big a deal to get it installed at all. And you're up and running within 2 minutes.
I think for one, an RO system is much more complicated. It's bigger. If you've got copper pipes, you really shouldn't have an RO system unless you're putting minerals back in. So this is like the best solution I've seen. And this is why I was so adamant on working with Charles, because it's I'm good at recognizing
good water.
Good water and paradigm shifts in technology too. So this is one of them. So I think everybody should, if you're looking for the right house filter, this is hopefully you're listening to this podcast.
Well, and guys, if you don't know who Victor is, I refer to him as the water guy, because Victor has been on the podcast before. He normally is talking about deuterium depleted water, which definitely has its place. It's a whole different science. It's a different area, but you've got to be starting with clean water at the get-go for your everyday before you even go to that level. And I think this is what this system is all about.
As you get more aware of water and its importance, the importance of its purity, then this becomes a priority, right?
Yeah. And the paradigm shift is critical. Like, this isn't just another system. This is taking an industry and changing it. This is changing the way that we address the water in our homes. And I know, Charles, you've got lots of other tricks up your sleeve. Jeanette was telling me something about a tub where you're infusing the water with hydrogen and oxygen for therapeutic use. Like, that sounds, again, kind of next level all over again.
We call it NP-BOT. I like to refer to it as beyond hyperbaric. So, in a hyperbaric chamber, you're limited to 2 modalities, which is namely oxygen and pressure. They have really good results, but it takes a whole lot of time, many, 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 many visits to the hyperbaric chamber to effect a change. And that's because it's a very limited modality where you cannot deliver hydrogen in a hyperbaric chamber. You'd have a bomb. You cannot deliver oxygen or as ozone in a hyperbaric chamber. It would oxidize the lung tissue. You cannot deliver carbon dioxide. It would suffocate you. You can't deliver one of the major gasotransmitters in our body, nitric oxide, again, also deadly in the air to breathe. but we can have developed a way using electrical charge and very small size to deliver far more oxygen to the most hypoxic tissue in the relaxing experience of soaking in a hot tub. And so, 20% of the people can't even get in a hyperbaric chamber because they're claustrophobic. And it's a real problem. And then 2 people died this year, one in Arizona, a poor little boy in Michigan. And it was an unfortunate accident. They were feeding pure oxygen, not concentrator oxygen, and a spark was all it took. But we can literally deliver more oxygen in a much more rapid fashion. And the key to delivering oxygen, believe it or not, is hydrogen. So when you're soaking in a hot tub that's got billions of bubbles in a milliliter of hydrogen, and it's smaller than a coronavirus, it's able to go right through the aquaporins in the skin. It causes a massive anti-inflammatory effect at the tissue level. And that opens up intracellular oxygen pathways that are squeezed off due to hypoxia from this inflammation, or creating hypoxia due to this inflammation, rather. And so now you get rid of the inflammation, they open up, and now the oxygen is able to go inside the cells. When you get the tissue inflammation to go down, the oxygen begins to increase, and now we've got oxygen that's also at the size smaller than a coronavirus, able to go through. And then you've got electrical charge. And so, how all of these things can exist in the same bathtub, we call it like the womb, like amniotic fluid, is normally, hydrogen would get it on with ozone, like the best looking girl at the dance and the studliest guy in the football team. But they can't come together because of the charge envelope on these nanobubbles. And so it becomes an incredibly powerful needle-moving healing modality. We're now adding Rife frequencies as sound, converted to sound in the tub. So now you're surrounding the entire organism in a redox signaling, gasotransmitting soup, and you're able to deliver custom-designed Rife programs. The reason we're converting them to sound is certain of the Rife frequencies with some of the graphene self-assembling arrays that are inside of people's bodies, they can be stimulated. When you convert that to sound, it has the same healing effect, but doesn't do anything to the nanotech. And so it's a really, really powerful healing modality. It's next level.
That'll be another episode. So that's the tub. But the good news is, if the tub will always be better if we can start with great water, which we get.
Well, and Victor, he knows all about the chlorine-free swimming pools that we do too. We do true nanobubble swimming pools and a variety of other things. That's a whole different experience when you can open your eyes under the water and you come out and your hair and your skin are softer than when you went in, like you went to some fancy, conditioning treatment at a spa, and you really just went swimming in your backyard. I told you I inherited this pool. So all of our neighbors have these gorgeous pools, and none of them ever use them. And I think it's subconsciously because they know about the chlorine.
Probably. Well, it doesn't make you feel good. All right. Well, let's close off on the home treatment system, and then maybe what we'll do is we'll have to do another whole other episode on the tubs and the pool systems and whatnot. So where people can find this system, if you're interested, guys, is you can go to lightwaterlabs.com/ELW. And you can use code NAT100, which will save you $100 off. And gentlemen, how do people learn more about you, follow you? Charles, where do people find you if they need to reach out? Or do you stay under the radar?
Well, we have a nice website. You can't buy the systems there. It's called Energized Living Water. There's a nice little movie I put together that really teaches people sort of the dark underbelly of the water world. Things you never wanted to know, you didn't want to know about how your water is made in your municipality. But Victor is, I would say Victor and his team are the best people to reach out to. I don't sell these directly again. And I believe down the road, Victor's going to handle the swimming pool systems too. So that would be another place to reach out. That website's nanobubblepool.com, but I would go through Victor because I don't sell the pool systems on the website.
So Lightwater Labs is where everybody needs to go, right, Victor?
Right. So Lightwater Labs is kind of a side evolution of Lightwater, because Lightwater is primarily devoted to deuterium depleted water, and Lightwater Labs is everything else that supports this.
Beautiful.
So in this case, we're talking about recreating a spring, like the best water in nature at home.
Beautiful.
Right. And so let's start with the shower, let's start with the tap, and then move on to the bath, and then add some of these other things like the nanoplasmoids. That you were just really quickly. You mentioned dissolved gases in water, and these are really important. And this should be a topic for future conversation. Just as you mentioned, the negative gases like radon, for example, there's a lot of studies and books written on why some healing hot springs are actually healing, and that has to do with dissolved gases that are in there. So I won't get into the details, but there's a lot to unpack there.
Cambridge University did. I'll leave you guys with this. If anyone wants to really dig in, they proved that our bodies are nanobubble generators. So the study is called the nano architecture of the cell, and they proved that when we inspire, when we breathe in, at the alveoli, we're generating N2 and O2 nanobubbles. And then when we expire, we're generating these CO2 nanobubbles through our interstitial foam. So our bodies are used to these gases, and they depend on them. They're used for signaling and all sorts of things. And when you're deprived of, when you've got, non-oxygenated waters and these other things like Victor's mentioned, they can be very detrimental to health.
Yeah. Well, the dead water.
The proper dissolved gases are very important. So what we're doing here is just we're creating solutions for how to have the best of nature in your own home. No matter where you live, and you just meant no matter where.
I love it. So once again, that's Lightwater Labs. Light is LITE. Waterlabs.com/ELW. Your code's NAT100. And Victor Sagalovsky and Charles Bohdy, thank you both so much for your time today. And let's hope that one home at a time, we can just bring nature back into people's houses through the water.
Thank you, Natalie.
Victor. I'm slightly jealous of that water on Kauai where you are right now. What a gorgeous backdrop.
It's pretty good here.
Well, I'm jealous of both of you.
It's a pleasure. So. It's a true pleasure.
All right, guys. All the best. Thank you so much.